Okay, in our last section, we were talking about the tools that the Fed has to control the money supply. Why does the Fed want to control the money supply? In order to control the economy. If we increase the amount of money in the economy, it tends to cause it to boom. If it's booming too much, well, then we're going to have to reduce the money supply to calm it down, to put some control rods, and it's taking it toward the bust. But it's got to be a controlled boom, a controlled bust, because we want full employment without any inflation. We said the first tool was to control the commercial banks' required reserves. Again, they have deposits. The required reserves, let's just say a nice round number of 10%. 10%. And so for every dollar that comes in, we keep out 10 cents, and we can loan out 90% of excess reserves. The larger the amount of excess reserves, the more low-powered money that the commercial banks can create. So if the Fed wanted to tighten up the money supply, it could take it from 10% up to 20%, and that means our excess reserves are now down to 80%. Ooh, we don't have as much money to loan out, and it reduces the money multiplier. So the first tool of the Fed is to control the required reserves of the commercial banking system. Now, the second tool of the Fed. The second tool of the Fed is the control over the discount rate, called the discount rate. What's the situation there? Well, let's say that a bank is fully loaned up. They've kept out their required reserves. They got some excess. They made a loan. They made the loan, and then they got some left. And they made another loan, and they don't have any more high-powered money to create any more loans. It's just not there. But it's a local customer. It's a really good customer. They really need this loan to expand this factory. We can't get any other bank to loan us their money. That's called Fed funds, which we'll mention in a minute. And so where else can we get high-powered money so that we can make another loan? Well, that bank could go to the Federal Reserve, called their discount window, and borrow money, high-powered money, directly from the Fed. Now, they rarely do this. They don't want to do this, but it's possible. They could get high-powered money from the Fed with which they could have the basis. If they're on a 10% reserve, for every dollar they get from the Fed, they can make a $10 loan. They just got to have enough high-powered money to back up whatever loan they're going to make. Now, why do they call it a discount rate rather than an interest rate? I don't know, but they're kind of in effect the same thing. Here's how this kind of works. Let's say that you loan $100 to somebody. And they give you a note. It says, I owe you $100, and I'm going to pay it back on a certain date, plus, let's say, just 10% interest. Plus 10% interest. And it's 1 year. So you loan them the $100. They give you this piece of paper that says, I, Mr. Jones, owe you $100 payable at the end of the year at 10% interest. Is that a legal document? Yeah. Can you enforce that in court of law? Sure. Yeah, they got to pay that. Now, so when you finally get paid, you're going to get $100 plus interest, which is $110. You loan them $100. At the end of the year, you get $110. That's called simple interest. Now, a discounted loan at 10% is a bit different. A discounted IOU means, okay, I'm going to loan you $100, right? Loan you $100. But rather than you pay me the interest at the end of the loan, I want you to pay me the interest at the beginning of the loan. So it's going to be 10% interest. 10% interest. And so here's the $100, but you got to pay me my interest right now. And so the loan is really, it's still $10, but you only get $90 cash because you had to take this part and pay the interest. That is called a discount rate or a discounted note. So whether you pay the interest at the end, like simple interest, or you pay it right at the very beginning and you don't get the full $100 because you had to pay the interest right now, that would be a discounted note. Now, because of that aspect of finance, when banks would go to the Fed, they would go to the discount window because the loan would be discounted right away and they had to pay the interest right up front, and that's why it's called the discount window or a discount rate. When they say the discount rate, they're really talking about the interest rate you have to pay on the money, but you're paying it at the beginning rather than the end. And obviously, if you're going to pay $10 right here, well, you got the full use of the $100 for the whole year. And you only had to pay $10. But in this case, you had to pay $10 and you only get the use of $90 for a whole year. So the effective rate is higher with a discounted loan than it is with a simple interest loan. All this kind of technical, just to give you a little background, say, why in the world do they call it the discount window? And why do they call it a discount rate? That's just kind of a background as to why they call it by that particular name. What you really need to know is the only people, the only banks that really tend to go to the discount window are banks that are really in desperate shape. Banks normally do not want to go to the discount window. They normally do not want to go to the Fed with hat in hand and say, I think I loaned out too much, and some of the people I loaned it to, they can't pay it back. So I don't have enough high-powered money to support all the loans that I got out there. And so I'm not really living up to the letter of the law, and I'm afraid that some customers might want to come in and need their cash too, and I'm running out of high-powered money, and I'm kind of in a bad way, and so I need to borrow some high-powered money from you, the Fed, at the discount window. Now, when they do that, they're almost admitting that they're a lousy banker, and they didn't plan well ahead, and they're really... The bank of last resort is going to have to come in and help bail this bank out. Well, yeah, they'll bail you out all right because they don't want a bunch of customers, a bunch of people out there saying, hey, I went to the bank to get my money. They don't have my money. And that psychology could spread like wildfire and we could have another banking crisis, so we can't have that. But if the Federal Reserve is going to help out that bank who's in deep trouble like that, you can expect a lot of rules and regulations and oversight to come with it because you're not doing a very good job. And so we're going to have a bank examiner in there. We're going to be going through all your books. We're going to check all your loans. And no banker wants that. No banker wants somebody to come looking over their shoulder and spending all your time explaining everything that you did. And you don't have a choice because they're in charge. Because they're in charge. Okay. So the first tool of the Fed is this discount rate. This for required reserves. No, it's the required reserves rate. I got to say it correctly. The first tool of the Fed is required reserves rate. The second tool is setting the discount rate. That's the interest rate that banks have to pay when they borrow from the Fed. Now, that's not used very often either. And when it is changed, it's in the Wall Street Journal and they publicize it. And if the head of the Federal Reserve says that they're increasing the discount rate or decreasing the discount rate, they're telegraphing, they're telling everybody in the financial industry, we are either going to make money scarcer or we're going to make it more plentiful. If they lower the interest rate, they're saying, hey, we're going to expand this economy. We're going to get it going. We're going to open the spigot. We're going to let the money come through here. We're going to loan this money at really, really cheap rates because we want it to be everywhere to get this economy going. On the other hand, if we're in an inflationary economy, they're going to raise the discount rate so people can't borrow as much, and they're going to try to tighten down the economy. So that's not used very often either. And when it's done, it's usually done for publicity purposes, if as much that as anything else, to give the financial community an idea of what the Fed is planning on doing with their policy. So we got 2 tools out of the traditional 3, and the Fed doesn't use them hardly at all. The Fed doesn't use them much at all. So how does the Fed really control the economy for the most part? The tool the Fed uses most often is called open market operations. Open market operations. And open market operations are conducted by the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee. This committee's secret, doesn't really say what's going on. It might release summaries of what it's going to do, vague summaries, if it wants to, a year or so later maybe. Doesn't have to. The Federal Reserve was created to be a private organization. It was created to be, quote, non-political. It does have to report to Congress, but it doesn't have to document anything. It can go to Congress and say nursery rhymes if it wants to. There's no requirement that it has to document anything. It just has to kind of go there and talk to the politicians and say whatever it wants to say to the politicians, because the federal government is not in control of the Federal Reserve. So how does this Federal Open Market Committee control the economy? Well, I'm going to diagram this. And once you get this diagram, I think you'll understand how this very, very powerful tool is used by the Fed. Let's say that inside this circle, that represents the economy. The economy. The entire economy. That's the economy. So now let me ask you a simple question. Are you in the economy? Yeah. Yeah. Is North Central State College in the economy? Yeah. Is the state of Ohio in the economy? Yeah. Yeah. Is the federal government in the economy? Yeah. Now here's the interesting point. The Federal Reserve is not in the economy, and that's the key. The Fed, I'm going to put the Fed, is over here. And conceptually speaking, it's not in the economy, and that's what makes this magic work here. This year, I think, was the last year for the college rock and ribs thing. I don't know if you went to that. I think this was the last year for it for a while. And the whole idea there was to have a community thing, and people go have ribs and stuff and have a good fun and have a band and take the family and all those sorts of things. And through admissions and vendors, fees and all that, we could create a cash flow that would create a pile of money which would go into the foundation, and the foundation could take that money and upgrade computer labs and all the sorts of things that are not in the regular budget. And so let's say the foundation made $10,000. Is that in the economy? Yeah. And did they put that $10,000 in a local bank? Yeah. And is the bank paying very much interest these days? No. So foundation wants to get some return on their money. What could they do to get a better return on their money? I think that in this case, let's say that the Fed buys a Treasury bill. It begins to buy some federal debt that pays maybe 10 times more than the local bank would pay. Because it's just the money's just sitting there until we need to upgrade the computer labs, and we're not going to upgrade the computer labs for another year and a half or so, or 2 years, and we want the money to make as much money as possible at the highest interest rate possible, and so we'll buy that. And so let's say that $10,000 is in the local bank. And we want to turn that into a Treasury bill. And so how do we do that? Well, we have to call up a local stockbroker somewhere, and we say, oh, we got $10,000 and we want to buy a Treasury bill. Now, a stock broker is not a stock dealer, it's a stock broker, which means that if we call him up, we want to buy from somebody, and he's going to find somebody who wants to sell, and he will broker the deal. He never takes ownership, but he charges us a little bit, and he charges them a little bit, and he takes their bond, and he puts it over into our account. He takes our money and puts it over in their account, and he charges a fee to both sides, and he never has ownership. So he is a broker. If he's a dealer, he takes it and buys it and puts it in his own account, and then it transfers from his own account to our account. But that takes more risk and ownership risk and all sorts of. He's a broker. So we call him a broker. And in this case, the Fed has already called our broker and say, hey, Janet Yellen has relatives in Richland County here. And so if anybody there is looking to buy some government debt, we're in the market, we'd like to sell it. Okay. So the broker says, oh, the Fed has a bond, and so what we'll do is we'll take that bond and we will take it and put it into North Central States Foundation, and this $10,000, which is in the foundation's local bank account, is going to go from their bank account and it's going to go into the Fed. Oh. Let me see now. What's going to happen? What's the effect there? The foundation gave up $10,000 of cash, but they now own a T-bill. Right? What happens to this $10,000 when it's inside the economy? It's high-powered money that's supporting a lot of loans. $100,000 worth of loans it's supporting. But when that cash leaves the economy, I don't have any high-powered money to support all this low-powered money creation, and I'm going to have to start writing off those loans, and I got to get something to get my loan portfolio down in line with my required reserves. And that would tend to decrease the amount of money in the economy. When this money leaves the economy, it goes back to nothingness from which it came. When the Fed creates high-powered money, it creates it ex nihilo, out of nothing. And when the Fed takes it back into their account, out of the economy, it goes back to nothing. Okay? So when the Fed buys assets, let's see if I got that right. Yes, the T-bill goes this way. They give up. No, when the Fed sells the asset, get it right. The Fed sells the asset, and when they sell the asset, they get the cash. When they get the cash comes out of the economy, and that decreases, that contracts the amount of high-powered money in the economy. Now, let's go in the other direction. Let's say that now the foundation owns a T-bill. The T-bill. And the Fed wants to expand the monetary base, right? Well, the Fed then wants to buy things. It creates money out of nothing and goes into the economy and buys things. It can be T-bills, it can be real estate, it can be anything that's there to be bought. They usually keep it to financial instruments, but as we'll see, it doesn't have to be a financial instrument. They're a private organization. They can do whatever they want, but they tend to keep it with financial instruments. When the Fed wants to buy something to expand the economy, well, they say, well, we want the T-bill, so in order to get the T-bill to go to the Fed's portfolio, when we see news articles about the Fed has increased their portfolio, that means they have more and more IOUs, they have more T-bills, but how did they get it? They created money, spoke it into existence, and that money, $10,000, comes into the bank account of North Central State College, and the T-bill that they got by having these past rock and ribs and things, the T-bill went into the Fed's portfolio as an asset, and now we got $10,000 of brand new high-powered money that wasn't there before. So how does the Fed get the economy going again? It simply buys things. Where does it get the money? What do you mean? It creates the money. When it buys it, that creates the money. So it creates the money out of nothing. It can buy T-bills, it can buy real estate, it can buy government debt, as we're going to see here in a minute. We can buy all sorts of things, and that creates new high-powered money, and then the fractional reserve banking system will multiply that through the fractional reserve loan process. Okay? What happens if people, that all of a sudden this money comes into a local bank, the bank says, I got $10,000 in reserves. I'm going to hold out $2,000. I'm going to make an $8,000 loan. And it starts going around this county looking for people to make an $8,000 loan, and nobody wants to take out a loan. If nobody takes out a loan, we can't expand the monetary supply. If nobody wants to take on any more debt, they got all this high-powered money, but nobody will do it. It's called a liquidity trap. Liquidity trap. Because all that high-powered money there, the bank can make all sorts of loans, but nobody wants to borrow the money. And all that liquidity is trapped right there inside the commercial bank because nobody will go expand their business or buy a new house or take a big expensive vacation or do something with their borrowed money because they're afraid the economy is in not good shape and they don't want to take on any more debt. And that's called the liquidity trap, when people simply refuse to borrow more money. So the three major tools of the Fed: when the Fed controls the required reserves, when the Fed controls the discount rate, and the Fed conducts open market operations, when it buys and sells in the economy. It either increases the money supply or it decreases the money supply, depending whether it's buying or selling. And just keep in mind, when it buys things, in other words, the T-bill goes into the Fed, that means brand new high-powered money is coming into the economy, and then that gets expanded through the fractional reserve banking system. As long as people are willing to take on more debt, it will expand the monetary system. If they don't want to take on any more debt, we have a liquidity trap, and the money's there. The banks are trying to loan money to people, but people just don't want to take on any more debt. Quickly, the fourth one is relatively new. Fourth tool is relatively new. It's called QE. It's called Quantitative Easing. QE, or Quantitative Easing. This is a tool that really came into vogue with Ben Bernanke when he was head of the Fed, that we had a lot of institutions out there that made loans to institutions and to individuals that were not creditworthy. And although it was profitable, they made a lot of fees on these loans. And when they loaned out this money, they got an asset, and they put that asset on the books. And according to the piece of paper, they're making 6, 7, 8% on that piece of paper. And so as far as accounting is going good, they made a lot of transactions when they placed the loan, fees and all that, and they're making 8%, but the guy's dead broke and he's never going to pay off that loan. I mean, he's not even going to pay the interest. There's no chance we're going to get the principal, and there's hardly any chance he's going to get any interest too. But that's a $100,000 note, and it's part of our asset portfolio. And in theory, it's making us 8% per year, and you're saying it's absolutely worthless? Yeah, it's absolutely worthless. Oh man, if that's absolutely worthless, then we got to write it off, and our assets are gone. We loaned him the money. He bought the thing, but the house is trashed and the whole property is trashed and we can't get anything out of it. And you're saying that that piece of paper is not worth anything at all? Yeah, it's really bad. But if we start writing this all off, that means that we just flat lost that money and we could be bankrupt. If these people can't pay back these loans, we loan them and they can't pay, then our institution could be bankrupt. Now, on paper, we were making a lot of money. When we placed the loan, we're making a lot of money based upon this 8% interest on this piece of paper here, but you're saying that piece of paper is a piece of trash? Yeah, it's a piece of trash. I can't pay it back. Oh, we're in deep trouble. Because that was an asset. And if all of our assets got to be written down and written down and written down, that means our assets might be, our liabilities could be more than our assets, because our assets are falling like a stone and we still got all these liabilities we got to pay. We could be bankrupt. We could be bankrupt. We went from making all kinds of money to all of a sudden being bankrupt. Wait a minute, we need help. We need a lender of last resort. We need somebody who can bail us out of this dead paper, this worthless paper. And who in the world would pay good money for something that is absolutely worthless? One answer. The Fed. The Fed will buy it. Oh, the Fed will, at what price? Well, full market price. Where are they going to get the money? Oh, you know the answer to that one. That's an easy one. We already know where they're going to get the money. They're going to create the money just by them writing. How much do you need? I need 378 million. Okay, that's 378 million, and it goes to what account number? 775222222, and I hit enter. That's how I made the money. When I hit the enter thing, that when it went into I just created the money right there. And now this asset, which is not worth anything at all, goes into the Fed's portfolio. Do they care that it's not worth anything? Is that going to affect their lifestyle any? Is it going to affect them at all? No. So why in the world would they do that? Why in the world? Because the bank that was holding it is their friend. It's their buddy. They're too big to fail. If they go down, it could create a domino effect. And so we got to prop them up, even though they made bad business deals. They made a lot of money doing those bad business deals. They took a lot of risk making those bad business deals. But are we going to let them face the music of going bankrupt for all the bad decisions that they made? No, they're our good buddies. You know, if they go down, well, the next one could go down, and then people could be drawing their money out of the whole industry, and they're too big to fail. And so we are going to do something like quantitative easing. We will buy up those assets, and now all that dead, worthless paper is now worth full face value, and these executives can now get a really, really nice, profitable bonus for making that really dumb decision. Now, do you see why people on Main Street are just a little bit upset about the government's treatment of the people on Wall Street? Because how many homeowners got bailed out? You can count them on your hands, and you'd be overestimating it, right? But a lot of the wealthiest, biggest, most prosperous, they're prosperous because they got quantitative easing, got bailed out. That's why they're prosperous. But they were too big to fail. So we have institutions that are so big and so influential with the Fed and with the federal government that we do things like quantitative easing. And what's the purpose of quantitative easing? To keep the whole economy from continuing to sink into a recession. In a free market, what would happen to this dead paper? It would be declared dead. And what would happen if that company now had more liabilities than assets? It would be liquidated. It would take a loss, it would go out of business, and some other company would buy up all the scraps and take over, and whoever owned that company is going to be out a lot of money because that company is now worthless. It's bankrupt. That's what happens in a free market. But we don't have a free market when it comes to our monetary and banking system in Wall Street. We have one in which the government, through the Fed, and the largest financial institutions in the world are out to protect one another. And so we have this, what I'm calling the fourth tool of the Fed, which is called quantitative easing.